Newark earthworks. The first of what came to be known as the Holy Stones was found there, and 5 months later, at the Jacksontown Stone Mound a few miles southeast of Newark, he found something even more amazing.
They found one major earth structure in the center, surrounded by 12 small burials. David Wyrick went straight for the middle one with 9 other gentlemen, and they began to dig that mound down. And they uncovered it. When they did, they found a wooden coffin made out of oak. And opening up that coffin, in there was a large skeleton of a man, but also in this coffin was a little box, no more than maybe about 8 or 10 inches in size, and it was cemented shut. Wyrick and the men, while they're all there together, they pried this box apart, and in it was a black stone. They opened this box, and here was this unusual artifact.
We own the Newark Holy Stones, and these stones were found in a Hopewell mound in the 1860s, and the presumption from finding them was that perhaps the American Indians had some kind of contact with the Hebrews, or possibly they were the Hebrews. That's another idea. So we have the museum has been interested in origins.
They took it to some scholars, identified that it was probably some type of Hebrew. They took it to some rabbis living in the area, and upon looking at it, they said yes, they could read it. And it was a complete rendition of the 10 Commandments. They called it Block Hebrew because they had never seen anything written like this, but they called it Block Hebrew. And so then naysayers started picking on Wyrick. He was accused of sticking this stone in front of these 9 men somehow and being able to hide it and conceal it.
Upon examination, mainstream archaeologists proclaimed the stones a hoax, while many diffusionists continued to believe in their authenticity.
There has been good points on either side for whether they are a first millennium piece of artifact or something that was devised in the 19th century.
Then it wasn't until sometime in the 1900s, lo and behold, in Israel, they find, guess what? They found block-style Hebrew. That block-style Hebrew was given a name by the experts, monumental Hebrew, because of the way it was written. Long after Wyrick. After.
Mainstream archaeologists dismiss such findings, in part because scientific protocols and rules of evidence were not followed in their acquisition.
Among the Mosaical laws is the obligation of one brother to marry his brother's widow if he died without issue. Major Long says if the deceased had left a brother, he takes the widow to his lodge after a proper interval and considers her as his wife. This is also confirmed by Charlevoix. It would occupy a greater space of time than I can afford to trace similitude between all the Indian rites and religious ceremonies and those of the Jewish nation, in their births and their separation after the births of their children, in their daily prayers and sacrifices, in their festivals, in their burials, in the employment of mourners, and in their general belief. I see a close analogy, an intimate connection with all the ceremonies and laws which are observed by the Jewish people, making due allowance for what has been lost and misunderstood in the course of upwards of 2,000 years. A general belief exists amongst most travelers that the Indians are the descendants of the missing tribes. Manasseh ben Israel wrote his celebrated treatise to prove this fact on the discovery of America. William Penn, who always acted righteously towards the Indians and had never suspected that they had descended from the missing tribes, says in a letter to his friends in England, "I found them like countenances to the Hebrew race. I consider these people under a dark night, yet they believe in God and immortality without the aid of metaphysics. They reckon by moons, they offer their first ripe fruits, they have a kind of feast of tabernacles. They are said to lay their altars with 12 stones. They mourn a year and observe the Mosaic law with regard to separation." Emmanuel de Moraes, in his History of Brazil, declares that America has been peopled by the Carthaginians and Israelites, And as the Israelites, he says nothing is wanting but circumcision to constitute a perfect resemblance between them and the Brazilians. The Reverend J. Betty, a very worthy missionary, says, I have often before hinted that I have taken great pains to search into the usages and customs of the Indians in order to see what ground there was for supposing them to be part of the 10 tribes, and I must own to my no small surprise that a number of their customs appear so much to resemble those of the Jews, that it is a great question with me whether we can expect to find among them 10 tribes, whatever they are at this day, all things considered, more of the footsteps of their ancestors than among the different Indian tribes. Trami and his discovery of the sources of the Mississippi, after a full of interesting account of the Indians, right? So remember what they found in the mounds, right? In these mounds, so many mounds in Mississippi, right? It says here that different authors have brought them hither from all parts of the world. I was at first induced to join with those who derived them from the Hebrews. It seemed impossible for me to doubt that by so doing I should be building an impregnable foundation. He then proceeds to prove their Asiatic origin by many interesting facts. The late Earl of Crawford and Lindsay published his travels in America in 1801. It is curious and pleasing, he says, in reading the travels of those who have been among these people, to find how their customs comport with the laws of Moses. And after describing the length their religious rites and ceremonies, his lordship emphatically observes, it is a sound truth that the Indians are descended from the 10 tribes, and time and investigation will more and more enforce its acknowledgement. Alright, so this is what we're doing, because with time and investigation, more and more is acknowledged, right? That's what we are doing. We're revealing this part of history that has been left from us. And this is beyond religion.
The Back Creek stone was found in the course of an official excavation by the Smithsonian Institution. Okay, then Back Creek stone went to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. They didn't understand it. They thought it was Cherokee since it came from Cherokee country. They did not realize it was Hebrew, and they published it upside down, and then they threw it in a box in the sub basement of the Smithsonian, and ever after it was poo-pooed until some Semitic scholars like Cyrus Gordon came and vindicated it. Cyrus Gordon, who was one of the great Semitic scholars of our generation, he talks about the writings that were found in this very area and how he was able to translate those things, translate that writing. When it was turned over, they were trying to figure out what type of Native American wrote this, and Cyrus Gordon turned it upside down. He recognized that it was actually Phoenician.
Phoenician, this older form of Hebrew, dates to the Old Testament Babylonian captivity and the scattering of Israel. Are there other linguistic evidences that may lend support to diffusionist ideas?
As a scholar of ancient languages, I have discovered that there are many symbols in the Mi'kmaq that are very close and similar to those of ancient Egyptian. About 700 BC in Egypt, there was a language that was developed or came in that was called Meroitic from the kingdom of Meroe, which many Egyptian scholars have even called Reformed Egyptian because it's so different than what the standard Egyptian that we know. And this Meroitic is very close to some of the signs of the Mi'kmaq.
It is, however, in Mexico and Peru that we must look for the most enlightened and most wealthy of the Indian race. Again, it is, however, in Mexico and Peru that we must look for the most enlightened and most wealthy of Indian race. On the representations of Montesini, who traveled in South America, the learned Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel, as I have said before, wrote his famous work La Esperanza de Israel, which he published in Amsterdam in 1650. endeavoring with great zeal to prove that the Indians in North and South America were the descendants of the missing tribes, and Cromwell, to whom the work was dedicated, was greatly interested in the evidences produced on that occasion. Montesini, traveling through the province of Quito, I believe it was Quito really, found that his Indian guide was a Jew, and pursuing his inquiries, discovered that immense numbers lived behind the Cordilleras. Francis, the name of his guide, admitted to Montesini that his God was called Adonai, and that he acknowledged Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his ancestors, and they claimed to have descended from the tribe of Reuben. Alright, so you guys are hearing this? The tribe of Reuben.